Welcome everybody to the Loft, and we are pleased you're here. And what is so special about the Loft, which I guess this is something more personal, is that it is a collaboration with the International School of Luxembourg. My name is Nancy Squitterini. Before becoming a facilitator for ECIS, I had the honor and privilege to be a staff member for over 31 years at the school. And so this collaboration means quite a lot to me. And what's even a bigger thrill is that the director, Dr. DJ Condon, is here just to say a few words, to introduce our guest. And also, I want to express myself to everybody here, my gratitude for this collaboration, which was his idea, and it was beautiful. So DJ, thank you for being here. And I'll let you say a few words and introduce our guest, please.
Okay, well, hello everybody, and welcome to the first Loft of the year. Very excited to be here. I'll just echo something Nancy said a moment ago. It was my honor and privilege 2 years ago to work with Nancy at ISL. And when she talked about the Loft, I thought, yeah, that's spot on. It's all about the vital conversation, because what we choose to talk about as educators matters for student learning, and it matters for our school culture. And I had a very similar feeling earlier this year when I was listening to a podcast from another former colleague, John Mickton, his International Schools podcast, where he was interviewing Helen Kelly, our guest today. And everything that Helen was saying in that podcast with John resonated true with me, that if we don't attend to the well-being of our colleagues and the well-being of ourselves, for that matter, and all the strategies that we might have, all the good plans and visions are really going to come to naught. We have to first and foremost remember education is about people, and it's about relationships, and we have to start there. It's been our good fortune to work with Dr. Helen Kelly this year. Everybody on my leadership team right now is reading her book, School Leaders Matter. We're all enthralled with it. She's met with our entire staff, and we're off to a really, really good start. Helen is, by training, is a lawyer. I think she worked in labor law for a long time. And then a number of years ago, decided to go into education. And that's really to our benefit. So she is speaking both from a legal standpoint, but also from a practitioner standpoint. She's worked in international schools around the world. She knows what it's like for international school educators, and she has really a lot to offer us all. So again, I want to welcome everybody, and I want to welcome you, Helen, for what's our first Loft of the year. It's going to be fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, DJ, so much for being here and to saying those words. Before I have Helen just start sharing her expertise, I just want to go over some logistics and also how the Loft came about and what we hope to achieve. So really, we wanted to provide resources, and having Helen here is a valuable resource in terms of her book, her expertise. We'll also be sharing where you can contact her. We also wanted to connect all of you and start making a community, which is the ISL ECIS Loft. We also thought about, we want different unique insights. So soon you'll be seeing some of our guests, and we welcome anybody to share those insights and those perspectives with us. We actually have another guest with us, Michael Newman. He'll be presenting in January. So we're really privileged to get these different perspectives from our community. And lastly, we want to elevate voices. Do me a favor, before we move on, out of those 4 objectives of the Loft, which one resonates with you the most? Pick either 1, 2, 3, or 4. And on the count of 3, you're going to put it in the chat. We're going to have a bit of a cascade. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Put it in the chat, please. Let's see which one resonates with you the most. Let's see what we have. Oh, we have a big group. Different, wonderful. Thank you. I love, we have 3s, we have 4s, they're all wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Because we are virtual, we do believe that we can still make connections. So with the Loft, we do have an approach. And the first is that we want to connect you in terms of our hearts, that we want to build community by making those connections and making sure you have a sense of belonging. We also believe in that everything that we're doing with the loss resonates with your head in terms of what Helen's presenting today. That's conceptual understandings and provocations. And the last is the most important. You are here, for many of you, at the end of the day. After this hour, what can you take that you can apply with you immediately after this session? And that is your hands, your takeaway. You're going to be shared this link that we want you to give us some insight of what you were able to use in terms of your hands and those takeaways. And when it comes to our virtual protocols for today, we are hoping that you use the connections. The chat is open. Put your questions in there. I'll be moderating the chat. So if you have any questions, you know what? We're a bit of a small group. We'll see it keeps on growing. We will ask some people to unmute, but please don't hesitate to put your questions in there. Or if you might be able to say, oh my goodness, I see Vicky, I don't have her email address. Write to Vicky and say, Vicky, I know you're doing something great at your school, get her email address. Also, social media, we have our hashtag. And lastly, for engagement, we'll be mute for the large group. Please, for the breakout room, have your video on. But for the large group, if you're comfortable just having your camera off, no problem. If you have your video on, even better, because we get to see your beautiful faces. And remember, the questions are in the chat. Lastly, before we move on to Helen, these are some of our upcoming guests. And we have Nunana and Emily, and we have Jolene. We're looking at diversity and inclusion. We have Michael looking at gender identity. We have Michael Johnson talk about sustainability. John Micton, AI, and then we have Chad, who is our next guest, and he's going to be focusing on MTSS. So if your school is involved with MTSS, he's the person to connect with. He's looking at strategies and also some common barriers we might have in international schools. Our next guest is John Micton, my dear, dear friend and colleague. I just think he's brilliant. He is doing AI, and I hope to have him back. And I love seeing that people are smiling when we see John's face, because he's actually one of the originators with me with the Loft when it was at ISL. So really thrilled. So now my little segue to Helen. First of all, there's a link in the chat, which if you haven't registered for session 2 and 3 of the book study, sign up now. Next, her website. Go to our website. As DJ shared, she works with schools, with staff, with not just teaching staff, we're talking about operational staffs in terms of well-being, in terms of empowering voice, and looking at how do we create that environment. So please go to her website with her resources. They're brilliant. And those of you might be thinking, do you know what? I wish Helen had a workshop coming up where I can really go deeper. Guess what? She does. In the chat, you'll get 2 links of workshops where you can really go a deep dive. You can bring cohorts, maybe 5 from your school, to be working together. So this is definitely something to share, and the links are in the chat. So this is when I stop talking and I have the honor. I have nothing else, DJ said it beautifully. And I just want to say, Helen is doing this for 2 more sessions. She's going to be working with middle leaders. I just think she's brilliant in terms of what she's providing to the international school community, and it's an honor. So I'm going to stop share, and I'm now going to hand it over to lovely, lovely Dr. Helen Kelly. Thank you for being here.
Hi there. I'm just going to share my screen now, so just be patient with me for a minute. So it's this one here. There we go. Can you see that? Yeah, brilliant. Hello, everyone. It's really delightful to be here. And thank you so much to Nancy and to DJ for their lovely introductions. And Nancy always gets such a great energy going. And for many of you, it's the end of the school day. So well done for keeping that commitment to be here today to learn more and discuss more about school leader wellbeing, because as DJ says, this underpins everything. So DJ's already introduced me, and I'm just going to briefly reiterate really what he said. You know, I have a background in the legal profession. I also was a principal in international schools for 15 years, all over the world, 3 different continents. I've worked in very many different contexts, so I understand the challenges that school leaders are experiencing. I also experienced an occupational burnout myself in 2019, so I bring a lot of personal experience to this. And I'm sure if some of you have made a start with the book, you will have read the preface, and that's where I start to tell my own story. I hope that you've gone further than that. It's been really wonderful over the summer, because although the book has been out since February, I think lots of people bought it and they didn't really have time to read it. And now over the summer, people have really had the chance to do that. And I've been getting some amazing feedback from people. I really would like to ask you, if you bought the book on Amazon and you're happy with it, please leave a review, because it really encourages others. And I am on a mission. This is about getting the message out to as many people as possible to try to help them to maximise their well-being and to understand why that's important, and to give them some ideas and strategies for how to maximise the well-being of the whole school community. Because although the book is called School Leaders Matter, the stuff that I talk about in there really applies to everyone in the school community. So we're going to do 3 sessions. The first one is today, and this is what the 3 sessions will look like. In today's session, book study session 1, we are going to learn together why school leader wellbeing matters, and we're going to use the burnout continuum as a framework to consider wellbeing. And then in the second 2 sessions, the second and third session, we're going to dig much more deeply into part 2 of the book. Those of you who've already opened the book and are a little bit familiar with it will know that it comes in 2 parts. And the second part of the book really is about those practical strategies. It starts with what governments can do, and we're not going to be talking about that in the book club, but then it goes into what schools can do to support leader wellbeing. So that will be our session 2. And then in session 3, we'll be looking at what you can do as school leaders to maximise your own well-being, but to maximise the well-being of other leaders in your team, whether that be in a senior leadership team or with your middle leaders, or both. So we're going to start today by understanding why your well-being as a school leader matters, and looking at the burnout continuum as a framework to consider well-being. So let's make a start. So why is it that school leader wellbeing matters? You know, this is why I'm on a mission, because the thing that I have learned over the last few years is that school leaders abnegate their own needs to the needs of their community. And so often people come to my workshops, school leaders attend, because they want to find out what they can do for others. They don't want to find out what they can do for themselves. And my view, and the research backs this up, is that's a huge mistake, because it's really important to prioritise your own well-being, and it's not something you should feel guilty about. And what I'm going to outline in these first few slides is why this isn't something that you should feel guilty about. So what we know is that healthy employees actually make more effective employees. And there's research going back in a wide range of different kinds of workplaces, going back decades, to show that healthy employees are more energetic. They concentrate better, they complete their tasks more effectively, they make better decisions, and they solve problems more effectively. We also know that healthy employees are actually more reliable. They are more resilient during times of challenge. And let's face it, we've experienced a lot of challenges as school leaders over the last few years, and ongoing challenges. You know, just because the pandemic is officially over, we're still seeing a fallout of that pandemic among our staff, and also among our students, and in international schools, you know, students' families, which of course are a huge concern to us. We also know that healthy employees actually engage in less absenteeism, so they're less likely to be off work, but they also engage in less presenteeism. And presenteeism is when we come to work when we're not feeling well, and we know that that's you know, a huge habit in schools, is to drag ourselves in. And although there isn't data from schools, from the education world, we know that in the corporate world, presenteeism costs organizations more in lost productivity every year than absenteeism. So it's something that we really, although we let it happen and in some ways encourage it, we should be discouraging presenteeism. We also know that healthy employees are less likely to leave their job, and they're less likely to leave their profession. And I'm going to talk a little bit more now about why that's important in the context of school leaders. So all of these factors around why healthy employees make more effective employees all point to why you as a school leader should not feel guilty about prioritizing your own well-being. Because actually, if you are healthy and if you are maximizing your well-being, then you are going to be better at your job, and your whole school community is going to benefit from that. What we also know is that leaders who are experiencing high levels of work-related stress are more likely to have negative feelings towards their work. And these negative feelings can be contagious. And we know from contagion theory, which is a psychological theory, that actually the contagion, where our emotions rub off on those around us, is actually more so between leaders and followers. So where we are a leader in a school, if we come in and we're not feeling positive, that rubs off on the people in our teams. We also know that we're more likely to engage in uncivil behaviour towards colleagues when we're feeling stressed, and this impacts on the quality of the workplace culture. And so much of the work that I'm doing in schools at the moment is about improving the quality of that workplace culture, because actually it underpins an effective school. And what we know is there is research around school leaders with this, is that school leaders who are experiencing high levels of stress are more likely to engage in those kind of negative relationships, and also more likely to engage in bullying and other, antisocial kinds of behavior in school. So let's go back to turnover. Why is this important? Well, we have research, again, going back decades, that shows us that a high level of school leader turnover is associated firstly with higher teacher turnover. And that's problematic because we know when teachers leave the school, especially during the school year, it impacts on the students, not only that they teach, but the students in the whole of the grade level or area of the school where they work, because it impacts the quality of teacher collaboration and it impacts the quality of the workplace culture. We also know that when there's a high level of school leader turnover, there's a loss of shared purpose and trust among staff. So that every time a new school leader comes in, they have to rebuild that, and that takes time. There's also a derailing of school improvement initiatives. And we know that where there is a rapid turnover of leaders, what tends to happen is the teachers just wait out. They wait out the head teacher or the director or the principal, and they don't bother implementing the change that's necessary in their classroom because they know that that person's going to move on soon. And we also have a lot of data to point to where there is a high level of school leader turnover, we have lower student outcomes. So remember, if we have healthier school leaders, they're less likely to leave their job. We're going to retain them better. And that retention impacts on the quality of the workplace culture, change within school, and also ultimately student outcomes. And that's our bottom line, isn't it? The student outcomes. Yet we know also from a whole range of data, which you will find in the introduction chapter in the book if you haven't already read it, a lot of data from countries all over the world that shows that the well-being of education professionals is markedly lower than the general population, and actually that the incidence of burnout in senior leaders is 1.7 times that of employees generally. And that data comes from Australia. You'll see that in the book. So whilst it's important that we prioritise our own well-being and don't feel guilty about it, actually we know that school leaders' well-being is not great, and it's something that we all need to take very seriously. So we're going to do our first breakout room now, which Abby and Nancy will help to facilitate. We're going to do a visible thinking routine, which I've tweaked a little bit. It's normally learn, like, link. I've added a list. So from those first few slides that I've shared, share something in the group that you've learned, share something that you like or something that resonates, something that links to your own experience or to your role. And if you have any questions coming from this first part, please put them in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides now because
Wonderful.
drop into the breakout rooms to hear what you're saying. And we're going to give about, let's have a look at the time now. Yeah, I think that we can give you about 10 minutes for that first breakout room so you can have the chance to have a really good chat.
Everyone is back.
Brilliant. Okay, so in that first section then, we looked at why school leader well-being matters and why you shouldn't feel guilty about prioritising your own well-being. And I drew on loads of research, which you'll also find in the book, to establish why it's important for the benefit of the school community, not just for the individual school leader's home life, that that well-being is something that's prioritized. So in the second section, we're going to look at the burnout continuum as a framework for thinking about school leader well-being. And so, you know, it's a bit scary when you say the word burnout, because people think, well, is Helen suggesting that we're all burnt out or that we're all going to burn out? But I actually find this a very useful framework. It's very concrete and tangible. It's also based upon many, many years of research by people who are much more clever than I am in this field. And so I find it's something that's not in any sense wishy-washy or airy-fairy. And many people have told me it really shifted things for them when they started using this framework. So burnout is a very overused word, but actually burnout was recognised by the World Health Organization in 2019 as an occupational condition that results from chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. And it's characterised by these three dimensions. And in order for burnout to be present, all three of these dimensions need to be happening with an individual. There's exhaustion. So we're not just talking about normal tiredness, we're talking about chronic fatigue that doesn't go away even when we feel well rested, we've had good sleep. And then the one indicator that I think is really useful for telling the difference between burnout and just being tired is this detachment, cynicism, or depersonalization, where we start to feel that we just don't believe in what we're doing anymore. We don't believe in what the organization is trying to achieve. And, you know, we're just not feeling it. We don't have that sense of purpose. And then the third one is this sense of reduced professional effectiveness. So we feel like we're not accomplishing anything in our job. And if all three of those are present, then that is a burnout. But burnout is actually on a continuum. And all employees, all of us here now, all school leaders, all school staff, people that work in any job all over the world are on this burnout continuum. And we start our careers at the engagement end, where we're not exhausted, we're not disengaged or, you know, cynical or depersonalized, and we feel a great sense of personal accomplishment. But throughout the course of our careers as school leaders, we start to move along this continuum from engagement through these that sometimes can be stages, but sometimes don't necessarily happen in this order. And, you know, we can eventually reach burnout. It doesn't happen to many people, but it happens to enough for it to be something that we should be concerned about. We know as well that it isn't a one-way street, that actually we might move along the continuum towards burnout depending on the job demands at any one time and also our capacity to cope with those demands. But if we start to notice that we're moving along that continuum, we're becoming exhausted, we're becoming disengaged, and we're not having that sense of accomplishment, there are things that we can do to move us back along the continuum towards towards engagement. And the thing that we want is for all of us school leaders to stay at the engagement end as much as possible for as long as possible. But we also need to be able to recognise when we might be moving along the continuum towards the bad end so that we can take steps to move back towards the more positive end. So what are the consequences of burnout then? Well, we know that when people experience a burnout or, start moving close to it, they're more likely to experience poor physical health. And there's a lot more detail about this in the book, in the final chapter of part 1. Poor mental health, more absenteeism and presenteeism, more leaving of their role or the profession, poor work performance, job dissatisfaction. And it's not all about the job. We also can experience a personal deterioration in our life satisfaction, or, just our general levels of happiness, and deterioration in our family relationships and our relationships with our friends. So it's something that we need to take seriously, because we don't want to go there. And, in the final chapter of the book, I talk about recovering from burnout. If you experience a full burnout, it can take many years to recover. And most people are not able to recover from burnout while they're continuing in their current role. So this is another reason why we need to take this seriously. So what are those signs and symptoms then that show us that we might be moving along that continuum and that we might need to take steps to bring us back? Well, signs of exhaustion. We may experience physical symptoms such as increased illness, chest pain, palpitations. That's what happened to me. If you've read the first chapter, you'll know. We might have sleeping problems. We might be experiencing anxiety or depressive symptoms. We might not be concentrating as well. And we might be, see lack of self-care. We're not taking good care of ourselves as we used to. And that's also one that's quite easy to spot in others. Signs of detachment or cynicism or depersonalization, negative feelings about the workplace, feeling disillusioned. When we used to love what we did, we felt such a sense of purpose. And now that seems to be gone. We're feeling disconnected from the people, whether that be from our colleagues or the students or parents. We're not enjoying our work. We start making plans to leave. And for school leaders, I think we seek isolation as well. That's shutting the door and staying in the office and not moving around the school and looking for opportunities to be out and about with people. And then the signs of ineffectiveness. So we may be less motivated than we were, less enthusiastic. But we also might be preoccupied with work. So if we're not feeling a sense of accomplishment, we're not feeling that we're doing as well as we were, we might overwork in order to make up for the shortfalls. And that's another way of, another sign to look out for in others is when people start to work very, very long hours uncharacteristically. Failing to take recovery time, is also tied in with that. And we also might see that we're less productive than we were and we're performing more poorly. And one of the ways of noticing this in teachers is we often see them having more problems with classroom management and student behaviour, when they're experiencing a move along that burnout continuum. So we're going to move into our second breakout now. Lots of things for you to think about there. So thinking about the burnout continuum and thinking about the signs and symptoms of burnout, I just want you to have a chat. What have you learned? Is there something that you like? Was there something that linked to your own experience or something that you've recognised in others? And again, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat box. And if we have time at the end, we'll be able to deal with some of them. I'm going to stop sharing now and we'll go into the second lot of breakout. So I'm going to look at causes of burnout now. This will be quite fast, but it's all there in the book. So, make sure
it's a quick review to review those.
It's a quick review. The final chapter of part 1, you'll find, and then there's more on burnout in part 2. So what we know then from the research, and there's some deep research here, is that burnout is primarily a condition of the workplace, and it's most effectively addressed at the organizational level. Nevertheless, there are things that individuals can do to support their well-being. But when we talk about the causes of burnout, we look mostly at work demands. And This is what we'll look at more in the second session of the book study. And then in the third session of the book study, we'll look at the stuff that's on the right, the work recovery. So I'm going to just go through these work demands and how these apply, particularly to leaders in international schools. So we know that a manageable workload is one of the biggest drivers of workplace wellbeing for school leaders. And in that, we need to account for not only the volume of the work, but also the emotional demands of the work. And chapter 2 is a whole chapter about the emotional demands of the work, which is often overlooked. There's also, I think, chapter 3 about the volume of work, the fast pace of the day, the unpredictability, the long working hours, all the different hats we have to wear and different skills and expertise we're expected to have. For some school leaders, actually research shows that the quality of the community is actually even more important as a driver of well-being in their workplace than actually the workload. And if we think specifically about international schools, there are 3 factors that I like to discuss here. This comes from my initial research from 10 years ago, that we have a community that's constantly in transition. We might be in transition ourselves, but we have staff, parents, students coming and going all the time, and that brings with it issues around the quality of the community. We also have cultural dissonance. Of course, the reason we want to work in international schools is because we want to work in a wonderfully diverse community that brings so much, but there's also always cultural dissonance. We have different understandings of what school is about, what education is for, what things should look like in the classroom, what relationships should be like, and that can impact on us and on the quality of our community. And then for school leaders, we have this huge issue of isolation. And if you dip into my website and look under publications and go back to my blog posts, my most read blog post ever was called "The Loneliness of the International School Leader," and thousands of people have read that article. So I'd really encourage you to go and look a little bit more deeply into that if isolation is something that you're experiencing. But of course, many members of the community can feel isolation. We're living away from family and friends. We're looking to the school to support us with everything. And that.
Why? I thought you were going to stay today.
Jason, could you mute yourself, please?
Excuse me, sorry.
That's okay, don't worry. Then we have control. We need to have high levels of autonomy over our work in order to experience high levels of workplace well-being. And if we don't have that, it can drive us towards burnout. So high levels of autonomy granted by our supervisors, whether they be the board or someone else. Our working hours, we don't always have control over, the unpredictability of our days, and the nature of our interactions with stakeholders are often outside of our control. Shared values. Our values as leaders need to be in accordance, they need to match the values of the board, our colleagues, parents, students, maybe even the country in which we're living and working. And we also want to see ethical behaviour. And when that starts to go wrong, that can drive us along that burnout continuum. Rewards, they can be extrinsic if there's a mismatch between what we need and what we're experiencing in the workplace, as far as our financial rewards, the validation we're receiving, the status that we have, or our intrinsic rewards, those values, again, whether we feel we're making a difference, are we being challenged, are we being provided with opportunities to grow, and are we being provided with opportunities to experience camaraderie, so back to the community. And if not, again, that can drive us along that continuum. And then finally, really important is this sense of fairness. If we don't feel we're being treated fairly regarding salaries and benefits, regarding promotion or our appraisal evaluation, the distribution of resources and workload, or whether we feel that we're being treated equally or that there is favoritism, those factors can start to move us along that burnout continuum. So we don't have time for the third section, but we do just have a couple of, for the third breakout, but we do just have time for a couple of questions. Nancy, I'm going to stop sharing, but if there was anything in the chat box that you thought might be worth us chatting about in the last couple of minutes.
Or if anybody would just like to also
Yeah, unmute.
Question for Helen, just unmute, please. We have like 2 more minutes. I know that's not the quickest time, but if anybody would like to share even something they really learned from their breakout session that you would like to share before we go, our last 2 minutes or so, please unmute.
One of the things that was very similar in both breakout sessions I was in is that the job is high stress, the job is high demands, but we all feel a very big responsibility towards the teachers who are also under a lot of stress. And though with the very best of intent, it is very hard to look after yourself. So if anybody's got a wonderful hint out there, I'm always happy to listen. And I did read your book, Helen. Thank you. It's marvelous.
Brilliant. And, you know, just remember that the next 2 sessions, the next 2 book studies are going to be much more, you know, we've set the foundations now. They're going to be much more practical about things that you can do at a school level, but things that you can do at an individual level to support your well-being. And also, you know, remember to dip into the book in part 2. There are lots of ideas and practical suggestions for how you can improve your own well-being and manage stress, and how you can support the well-being of other leaders in your school.
Do you know what I found really interesting? There's a man that I respect greatly, and he would always tell me when I worked with him how, Nancy, you have to take care of yourself. But now this dear man is not as well, but he's not taking his own advice. So isn't it funny how, as a leader, we're able to tell our staff, take care of yourselves, stop working, you really need to have that downtime. But when someone tells the leader that,
yeah, the reason I'm laughing is because I know who Nancy's talking about. Yes.
But it's so funny, Vicki, don't you think? We don't take our own advice.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I think maybe one thing that's worth leaving on. Yes, I acknowledge this is hard. Yes, exactly, DJ. Yes, I acknowledge that this is hard. And yes, I acknowledge it requires courage. But you are acting as role models for other leaders in your organization. And no matter, you know, so that's important too. You can start to make change by showing others that it can be done in a different way to how they've seen it done before. And I think that that's important. And also remember, don't be disheartened. The smallest thing that you can do to improve your own well-being or improve the well-being of other leaders in your school is going to make a difference. And if we drip over time, you know, we can achieve amazing things. I've seen that happen in the schools that I'm working with and with individuals that I coach. So I hope that you'll come back for the other sessions. But please feel free to reach out to me or come to my workshop. I love receiving emails. I'm also on LinkedIn, which is a really good place to find me. So yeah, if you want to chat more, let me know.
Thank you, everybody. You can unmute. A big round of applause for Helen. Thank you so much, Helen. I think you're also inspirational because you are so positive and thinking about how we can go through the continuance. So thank you. We hope to see you all for the next book study. Please share the link. It's open to everyone. And as you saw, some people haven't finished a book and they contacted me and said, could I still attend? Absolutely, because the conversation is really about how do we take care of ourselves and then eventually taking care of others. So thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. And before we go, there is a tradition that we have to have a virtual high five. I'm sorry. I am the epitome of cheesiness. I know. I don't know why. You have to put your hands on the side of the screen. And on the count of 3, we do high five. 1, 2, 3, high five. 1, 2, 3, high five. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon. Thank you, DJ, for being here as well. And everybody, Shireen, my love, Vicki, it's so good to see you all. So goodbye, everybody.